pleasure to introduce to you Shauna MacKay. Shauna and I went through yoga therapy school together at the Soul of Yoga in Encinitas. It was their very first offering of the course. I don't know how many years ago it was, but it seems like a lifetime ago. And Shauna has gone on to serve clients in the San Diego area. She is loved by her clients as a yoga therapist, and she teaches as well, of course, yoga. And today she's going to share with us her story. Shauna has, in this lifetime, experienced a tremendous amount of loss, and she's going to share her story with us. And what she has found, what are the tools? What is the understanding behind this emotion of loss, of grief? And I just feel it's so timely right now, because I feel that each of us is feeling that sense of loss. Even if it's not a specific person, we're feeling it for the whole world. We're feeling it for the whole planet. So how do we deal with this emotion, and why do we even want to deal with this emotion? So without further ado, I want to introduce Shauna. And Shauna, thank you so much for being with us for these next 30 minutes. I can't thank you enough. So we'll start with you sharing a little bit of your story so people have an understanding. Dick, I can hear you. Hold on one second. I'm so sorry.
Well, let me begin.
Dick.
I'll start out by saying that grief makes us vulnerable. And so I'm feeling vulnerable. Grief shatters and scatters our intellect. So as we go through grief, we may have losses in memory and a scattering of our intellect. So I'm premising my interview with the fact that I am vulnerable, and at times I may feel shattered and scattered. That's a normal part of the grief experience. So thank you, Abaya. It's my true pleasure to share my journey of grief. In fact, it's really a reflection of my life. I think grief has been there from the beginning. My mom was dropped off at a doorstep when she was young and abandoned by her mother. Her mother went on to have another family, and my mom never really had access to her mother. She was raised by her very, very elderly and very poor grandparents. So I was born into an energy of non-attachment. It was difficult for my mom to have this sense of attachment to the baby. And this sense of grief permeated my life from an early age. About grade 5, my only brother was diagnosed with brain cancer. And at that time, the surgery and radiation left a young person like that with a lot of physical and mental, social deficits. That was probably the second major grief I felt in my life. But I didn't call it grief. I didn't know what it was. I just pushed this feeling of the structure of my life being blown up. I just pushed that down and carried on towards goals and achievement. It wasn't until a series of losses. My dad passed away. Then 2 years later, my mom passed away. A year later, my brother passed away. A year after that, my sister was diagnosed with cancer. And then more recently, my beloved older sister was diagnosed with glioblastoma, which is a very aggressive form of brain cancer. That was 15 months ago, and she passed away on March 2nd of this year. When we got the diagnosis last January that my sister had a very poor prognosis, I instinctually knew that if I didn't lean into this opportunity of grief, this opportunity to learn, that I would end up the way I had ended up the other times I had buried my grief. When my mom passed, I got shingles. When my brother was sick, I got very anxious. That underlying depression, that underlying pain in the body that I'd lived with for a lot of my life was going to bubble up if I didn't take this on as an opportunity to grow and expand.
So we're told that various emotions really can find a very specific place in your body. Anger finds the liver quite successfully. We are told that grief finds the lungs. And I'm thinking that at this particular time of COVID, for those of us who may have lungs that are not necessarily 100%, and who may also at the same time be feeling this emotion of grief or loss for whatever that purpose or reason is that your understanding through what you've learned that that's where it might manifest the most?
Yes, well, let's just begin, Abaya, by saying that every person experiences grief differently. It's like explaining how you are in love or how you fell in love. Everybody has a different relationship, and it's a little bit of a different story. So we are all unique individuals, and our experience of grief manifests in many different types of emotions, physical sensations, spiritual challenges, and behaviors. That's part of the journey of acceptance, is allowing yourself to be exactly where you are. And for me, it was about making space for what's arising with that feeling of destabilization when there's a loss of something we're attached to, something, someone. It takes away the foundation of our life. And depending on how much we loved or how much we were connected or attached to that person or experience or place, that can create a sense of fight and flight in the body, which is manifested in many different ways. So I think the first thing that we want to do is to support each and every individual in having their own experience and expression of grief. Um, it is an expression often of the heart. And we do know that the cardiac and respiratory rhythms are definitely affected by grief, but also are the circadian rhythms, the ability to sleep, the desire to eat, sometimes more, sometimes less. Sexual function is also affected. So it's like this big bomb goes off in one's heart, and the pieces go scattered everywhere. And at the early phases of grief, they are a reflection of probably our own way of being in the world, only much more exaggerated.
I think what surprised me most about grief, just to share, my son's father died in a car accident a year after he was born, and I think what surprised me most at that time was the physical pain I felt. I was literally brought to my knees at times, and it was amazing to me. I was like, why hasn't somebody told me about this? I was so surprised with the physical pain involved, let alone everything else that was going on, right? So in all of your searching now as to how to really embrace and work with and understand this emotion of loss and or grief, um, what have you really found in regards to where do you start? How do you begin to other than putting one foot forward in front of the other, which we all know we have to do, but there are times when even that is just impossible, and the idea of cooking a meal is, there was a point where I know I would be hungry, and if I didn't have something to eat at that moment in front of me, I lost my appetite within seconds, and I wouldn't eat again for hours and hours. So the vata, for those of you involved with Ayurveda, the all the doshas are extremely imbalanced at that time. So, what is your finding here? Where do you begin with trying to deal with this?
Well, I think, it's exactly what you said, Abaya, is that for some people, I remember the physical pain in my heart. It was real, a real constriction.
Right.
That's one manifestation. Kick in the pants to the immune system and the shingles that I got when my mom was dying. The aggression and the rage that you're seeing sometimes in our communities is also a reflection of grief. it has many, many manifestations. And so I think the first place we start is making space for what's arising,
Right.
allowing it to be, allowing it to be exactly as it is. And if you have a friend, a counselor, a family member, somebody who can hold space for you, just listen. There's no fixing here. There's no trying to resolve or change. There's no that a boy, or it'll be better soon, or you'll get through it. That is not what it's about. It's about allowing that person to have the space to share whatever is needed to be shared from their authentic perspective. That is the first and most important thing, is to create space for your emotion, just like any emotion as it's rising. When we put our damper on it, what we can't be with won't let us be. And it would be very surprising that in this time that most people aren't dealing with some kind of grief. Certainly every student that comes to me as a yoga therapist has an element of grief. If they are coming to me after a cancer diagnosis, or even a low back pain, they have lost something in their life, a certain confidence or a certain activity, that there's this loss and this loss of, and how do we reshape our life after a loss? So that's the first thing. The second thing that we want to do is to, after we normalize it, is to help create a sense of stability or a sense of restoring oneself. So, because when we're scattered and shattered, and our nervous system is fighting for survival, it is very difficult to have a centered, grounded sense of who we are. And so the most gentle place to start is with movement. Movement can take the form of asana, as in yoga, breath-centered movement, or movement can take the role of a walk around the neighborhood. Connecting with the rhythm of the breath, expanding, like you talked about, the lungs, and finding that rhythm can help to start that journey of processing emotions through the physical body, through the physiology that's having to create anew after this loss.
Would you say that routine would play in at this point? That to establish a routine, regardless of it may not look like anything. It may not look like a routine that you've ever had before, but even just setting that intention to get up at a certain time, to eat a certain time, to definitely take a walk, and maybe it's just 4 things during the course of the day that you just spread out over the course of the day, so that there is a routine and a grounding. Would that be at this time that you would start to implement that?
Well, absolutely. You know, both you and I, as yoga therapists, know the importance of routine, and that the body loves to be able to depend on the next meal, and when to digest and when to sleep. Of course, that is a really essential component of well-being and health. However, it depends on where we are in our grief journey. At the beginning, we may be in the survival mode, and I think the allowing ourselves to be exactly where we are is also part of the tenderness, and the leaning in, and the self-acceptance of the loss, whatever that looks like for you. To not intellectualize too quickly, to allow yourself to have those waves that need to come up, and trusting your innate self. But as soon as you're ready for that next place of restoring oneself, routine practices, breath work, and using gentle guided meditation like Tratak, which is a guided meditation of staring at our thumb and then staring into the distance. It's just allowing the mind to reset, to come back home to itself. And then gentle breath practices can be very, very helpful for the sense of control of the autonomic nervous system. But these are all done with a sense of tenderness and timing and deep respect for the individual.
And I would imagine all of that starts to help one renew their sense of identity, because whether we want to admit it or not, we do identify when we're in a relationship. We have a certain way that we are within a relationship. And when that relationship is not there anymore, it's kind of like a piece has been taken away from you. So we need to, I know I had to completely identify who I was. It was a complete makeover. And it was at times actually very painful, at times very enlightening. All of it was growth. I mean, I look back on it now and I just go, wow, that is just so amazing. What an opportunity. I didn't see it at the time. There's no way I could have felt it at the time. There was just absolutely no way, but what an opportunity for growth. And I think we were talking before we came on live about restoring that sense of self and sort of redefining where grief is. And maybe you could speak to that a bit.
Yes, I mean, of course, when there's a loss of a life and a loved one, that's tragic and devastating at the exponential level. But I also want to address what's happening for many of us at this time. There's a loss of jobs, there's a loss of careers, there's a loss of routine, there's a loss of identity. There's a multiplicity of losses that we are experiencing in small and large ways that may lead to a sense of grief arising. I think we need to make space for those as well. When there is that loss, and it may be something, oh, gee, okay, so I can't go to my normal fitness class or my normal yoga teacher or do what I normally did to help manage myself. You know, at least I'm safe, or I've got a roof over my head or something to eat. However, it's really important in the grief journey to examine not just the primary loss, but the secondary loss. So whether it's a loss of a loved one, like in my case with my dear sister Sheila, with that loss of not being able to have a relationship with her in the physical body, I've also lost a sense of my connection to my culture and my heritage. My sister she's my oldest sister, and she's deeply connected to my Scottish roots and to the extended family and to the joy of fiddle music and my heritage on so many levels, not to mention the country and the province I was raised in. And with the loss of my sister, I also feel this loss and this longing of my sense of tribe, who am I without Sheila and that connection to where I come from and my ancestors. That's just one of many, but secondary losses can be as equally painful in some ways, and giving yourself the opportunity to contemplate what are some of the things that I'm losing as a result of this quarantine that may be affecting my heart and my sense of stability inside myself.
So, what are some of the other tools, in a sense? I hate to say tools, but we all do have a toolbox that we do open occasionally when we remember to do so. What are some of the tools, or some of the ways in which you have found to really, other than just being able to be and embrace and be gentle with yourself, are there, and establish that sort of routine, are there some other practices that you have found through the trainings that you've been in, through the people that you've spoken with, and your own experience that you'd like to suggest and share?
Yes, and I don't mean to be vague. However, it is a little bit like describing the reinvention of oneself. That sense of intimacy and tenderness with oneself is primary. We can put practices, and I'll share some of the practices that I do that help. We can put those on top of the loss, but the grief is a sense of disconnection from safety, from our intimacy with that what we hold on to, whether it's our belief in something bigger than us, our religion, our sense of self. And that giving ourselves a chance to be tender, to create space, to speak, to be creative, to express, to emote, to do what we are instinctually being driven to do as this unique human being is an important part of that journey, because that's going to connect you more deeply to your soul and your authentic self. And that's what's going to take you to the place of resetting yourself and the land of something new, a new you is being born. So that is such an important part, to not overlook that, and to allow that to be as long and as often. And in fact, it'll probably never end, this new dimension of relationship with your own tenderness, with your own brokenness, with your own heart and soul. You see, for me, grief was that crack in my armor. Before that, I was quite pitta. I was quite armored up to be successful. I didn't want anybody to see that brokenness inside of me. But it took several of those in a row to allow the heart to break open so that I could reemerge with a sense of strength that is more internal, more deep, more connected to who I am, and not about who I was projecting in the world. So that's the spiritual and the deeper possibility of this journey of grief, if we can allow it in. In fact, grief sometimes is diagnosed in the Western medical model as all kinds of conditions. And there is a role for medical intervention in complicated and prolonged grief, and for certain individuals with other conditions. But grief is not an illness. It's a natural reaction to our losses. It's a place of transformation. It's the willingness to be held and supported as we explore our connection to life and death. So that being said, moving on from there, the most gentle breath practices have been very effective for me. Even just breath awareness, allowing myself to fall in love with the inhale and the exhale, to bring that tenderness as if I were holding a baby and watching my own rising and falling of my breath, and connecting to my own inhale and exhale has been really helpful. But then, of course, moving on to alternate nostril breathing has been just a joy and very helpful for winding down at the end of the evening, or sometimes just left nostril breathing in the middle of the night. If I wake up and I can't go back to sleep, I'm just pressing the right nostril and allowing myself, the Chandrabhidana, to the left nostril breathing to start to bring me back to a center point in my mind. And then, of course, guided meditation, including Yoga Nidra, have been extremely, extremely helpful. These are very, very easy practices, but it's that willingness to support yourself as you're going through this metamorphosis, this transformation that grief is going to bring you to. You see, because we don't get over grief, we don't get over losses, and we don't want to. Looking at a picture of my sweet sister right now. And what we do is we make space. We open the heart. We make space for the loss. And we make space. The last part of the journey of grief is to establish a new relationship with what has been lost, to invite the joy and the confidence and the "you go girl" that my sister would be saying to me as I'm doing this interview, to allow that to be there. So to transform the form and the shape of the relationship that we have had with what's been lost. Those are really the steps that have been most useful for me. It's a transformation. And, as we're getting towards the end, I wanted to put the possibility of the light at the end of the tunnel. And during the dark night of heaving, I remember when I first got the phone call that my sister had 16 months to live with treatment. I got off the call and I started heaving. The body did not want to accept, couldn't take that in. I wanted to release that. But the process of allowing myself to get supported and then doing these gentle practices to open up my heart has allowed me to make space. The light at the end of the tunnel is that I'm a different person than I was before. I have more compassion. I have more openness of heart. I am more present with my own suffering and my own losses, and I can be more present and more compassionate and more loving with yours. And I think that's the type of world we want to create.
And of course, Prashanti Jujagar is going to tell us that the light at the end of the tunnel is the illusion. The light is always there. So the tunnel is our journey to go through and to remember that that light is there and to find it within us, to lift those veils. So that's so beautiful. Shauna, thank you. I really thank you for being so courageous and brave and kind to share your story and what you learned. And I'm just hoping that for those of you that are listening, that there's some little nugget here that you can hold on to, and maybe when we download this and put it onto YouTube, you'll go back and listen again and listen to the other interviews that we've all had that kind of been leading up to this, because this is our April launch and we're ending with Shauna on such an important subject. I will be putting out May. The May schedule is really phenomenal. The subject is food, and I've got some incredible people that will be interviewing with all different concepts of food and the importance of it. So that's going to go out today or tomorrow morning early. So definitely look for it. But meanwhile, I just want to thank all of you so much, and thank Shauna so much for your time. This is all karma yoga. This is all seva. There is no money involved here at all. My desire was to be able to speak out. My desire was to be able to reach and to share awareness and to share so much of what I've learned through my life. And that's how Jivamaya Yoga Wisdom Talks kind of began. So I really thank all of you so much for listening. If you do go onto YouTube, the Jivamaya Yoga Wisdom Talks YouTube, please subscribe. I want to try and get up there a little bit on the subscriptions. That is how you could help support us. But once again, Shauna, thank you. Thank you for your journey, for your incredible spirit. I think you can all understand why Shauna does so very, very well as a yoga therapist in San Diego, because she's just got such a beautiful heart and beautiful spirit and so understanding, and people feel very, I hate to say the word safe, but they feel very embraced and very safe, and it's lovely. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you. Can we end on a quote by a modern poet?
Please.
John Lennon said, he said, "I don't believe in death." He said, "It's just exiting out of one car and stepping into another."
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you, Abhaya.
Thank you so much. And I've also put over to the right, there's a suggested book, Yoga for Grief Relief. Yeah. And Antonio also has a website, and he also does give private counseling. So I think, I know Shauna's worked with him a little bit, and he's absolutely amazing. And there's a lovely site apparently called grief.com, where you can get daily online meetings. And there is a complimentary counseling available, I believe. So that's definitely worth checking into. So, of course, always I need to say that if there is any medical condition going on, please check with your doctors. This has got nothing to do with trying to say do this instead of that. It's a very, very different sort of add-on. It's a different approach, and one that one should be using with wisdom, Jivamaya wisdom. All right. So thank you again, Shauna. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Namaste. Be safe, be well, be wise. We will see you on Wednesday May 6th, where I will be interviewing Amadea Morningstar. And Amadea is a gem to our society. She's written 3 amazing books on food, and I look forward to her talk. So once again, thanks, Shauna. Take care. Om Shanti.